Welcome to the Winnebago County Community Mental Health Board Program Year 2022 to 2023 Grant Seekers Meeting. My name is Jason Holcomb and I am the Director for the Mental Health Board. I'm going to do a high-level overview today of the grant, and you can find additional resources on our website's funding resources page. The URL is listed here for that. On that page, among other documents, you will find the notice of funding opportunity, the strategic plan, and the Mental Health Board's funding policy. Just to talk a little bit about the notice of funding opportunity, eligibility for applying includes not-for-profit corporations who are in good status as a 501c3, for-profit businesses, hospital and healthcare organizations, including FQHCs, government entities, and departments within Winnebago County government. The lead agency applying on an application must have been in existence for at least 3 years prior to the application year. In terms of the timeline, after the application goes live today, there will be some additional grant question and answer sessions, one on December 9th, one on December 17th. We encourage you to pre-register for those if you'd like to attend, and it's a good opportunity for you to ask questions as you're going through the application and the other documents and have things that you would like to clarify. The application actually closes on January 31st at 5 p.m. Central Time. That is a Monday, and that will be a hard deadline for applications. April 6th is the targeted date for board decisions to be made. There will be a board meeting at that date and time. Grant reviews will be happening then between January 31st and April 6th. And the actual program year for funding that we're talking about is from June 1st, 2022 through May 30th of 2023. Quarterly reports will be due for all funded agencies on a quarterly basis throughout that program year. Just to talk a little bit about the strategic plan, probably the most important element of the plan is this community support system framework. It is the goal of the Mental Health Board to build a coordinated system of care in Winnebago County that allows for children and adults with serious mental illness and substance use disorders to live and recover in their community. If you go back and watch some of our earlier videos on the convening organizations for collaboration, you'll see a much more detailed overview of the community support system model. There are 6 priorities within the strategic plan that are eligible for funding. Mental health treatment, which is the service areas are identified here for that. Target populations and system capacity and individual and family outcomes are outlined for each of the 6 priorities in the strategic plan. Again, those were also discussed in more detail in the convening organizations for collaboration video, which you can find on the funding resources page. You can click a button there that will take you to the YouTube page to watch that recorded video. I'm not going to go into great detail for each one of these today since we previously covered them, but I will note that we do not anticipate that funded programs will need to meet I'm going to move my thing here so you can see the community outcomes. We do not anticipate that each funded application will make a population level change. We're anticipating that funded programs address system capacity outcomes and individual and family outcomes, and that the collection of funded programs and building a system of coordinated system of care will ultimately lead to population level community outcomes. See here priorities 4, 5, and 6. And again, these are all detailed in the strategic plan. Funding amounts for this program year. There is $15 million in total that may cover the priority areas as previously shown on the last pages. mental health treatment, the clinical components of mental health treatment, crisis response services, case management, family and community support, client identification and outreach, and housing. Target populations include infant and early childhood mental health, serious emotional disturbances, serious mental illness, and substance abuse or substance use disorders. Trauma is included in serious emotional disturbances and serious mental illness. And if you look at the strategic plan, the definitions for each target population, there is some specific language around trauma that you should review if you're looking at funding a program serving people who have experienced trauma. There are a little bit of overlap in the age brackets for each of these, since some diagnostic categories have overlap in the appropriate age levels for that diagnostic. Just one thing to note, that the first top 4 priorities, mental health treatment, crisis response, case management, family and community support, were all focus of funding in the first year. So that does not mean that new applications cannot include those, but client identification and outreach and housing were not previously funded in the earlier year and will be new priority areas for this funding year. Additional funding resources are on the Mental Health Board funding resource page. I already previously noted or discussed this convening organizations to collaborate YouTube video. I encourage you to watch that if you'd like a more detailed information about the community support system framework and the priority areas. We kind of broke down each priority of the 6 in that video and talked about it in a little bit more detail. I would also encourage you to sign up if you are interested in potentially collaborating with other organizations on a collaborative application, or to look at the organization collaboration interest list. Click that button and you will see other organizations who have already signed up expressing interest, and you will see the type of priorities that they are interested in collaborating on and the target populations that they are able to or willing to serve. Funding policy. This is an important document that dictates in an official capacity what the Mental Health Board funds and what the requirements of funded agencies are. I encourage you to read the entire document, but I will highlight a few critical components of it. Number 1, no agencies who have an affiliation, a direct affiliation of employment or a board affiliation with an appointed Winnebago County board member will be eligible to apply. There's a list of disqualified agencies that will that is on the website at the funding resources page. I encourage you to look at that. If you see your organization on that list and you do intend to apply, you should reach out to the board member with whom you are affiliated and let them know of your interest in applying so that they can make a decision about how to remove that conflict of interest. Administrative requirements for the lead organizations. It is one critical component of that is that for any of these funded programs, you may not deny a client service within your program for an inability to pay. And also it is required that all funded organizations attend learning network collaborative meetings that happen this year quarterly. We may increase the number of those next year, but that's an opportunity for funded organizations to coordinate efforts with one another in the ultimate goal of creating a coordinated system of care. In terms of the fiscal expectations for the lead agency, one thing is that no more than $3,000 of budget movement is allowed between categories. So be very particular about how you develop your budget. If you do realize that your budget was off and that you need to make a major change in it, that would require a board vote. And secondly is that on the indirect cost rate, you may elect a 10% de minimis. If you're going to take an indirect rate higher than that amount, you must submit a state or federally approved indirect rate agreement to the mental health board to establish that you have been approved by a state or federal government to take a higher than 10% indirect rate. In terms of the allocation and decision-making process, I just want to highlight that while we as staff do help facilitate this process, it is the board members who review and score the applications and who ultimately vote and make the decisions on what is funded. Post-award, we will develop work plans and a final approved budget for each agency, and that along with a funding agreement will be signed by each funded agency to establish a contract with that agency for the services being funded. This is a standard grant, so it is expenditure based. Organizations are reimbursed for approved expenses after they have made those expenses and submitted to the mental health board their evidence of those expenses and a budget for the month in which those expenses accrued. Again, so expenditure-based grant. Performance reporting is required, but it is not a pay-for-performance grant. Upon request, we may do advanced payment or reimbursement at a frequency other than monthly, but that would be an upon request for special circumstances. Monthly reimbursement is the preferred method. Renewal is certainly a possibility. It's the intent of the mental health board to continue to fund successful programs. However, that is not a guarantee. So please understand this is only a one-year contract will be provided for awarded programs. If contract amendments are needed during the year for the work plans, the board president may approve, deny, or ask for a full board review. And again, there's more details of each of these policies in the funding policy document. For reporting, as I previously mentioned, there is both a requirement for quarterly and annual reports to be filed by each program that will essentially report on specific program outcomes, numbers served within the target population, numbers served as a breakdown of different demographics, and then some qualitative components to identify like lessons learned and areas for improvement. On the financial reporting side, essentially, as I previously mentioned, there'll be a monthly reimbursement form in which you will have to document what your expenses were and provide best evidence for each of your expenses. That may include, in some cases, timesheets, receipts, a financial statement, etc. This is very important, so I'm going to slow down for a minute and go through this with you. For your financial reporting requirements, there are types of programs that are more complex and some that are not as complex on the reporting requirements. If you see across the top, your program may either be not generating revenue, or alternatively, it could be generating revenue outside of the funding from the mental health board itself. So that could be matching dollars from another grant. That could be a program where some of the staff are providing fee-for-service services that are reimbursed and other staff are not. Also, then along the left side vertically, you'll see that your program may have fully dedicated staff that only work on this project, or there might be staff that are not 100% dedicated to this project and that they are, maybe at 50% on this project and 50% doing other work. Based on these two decisions that you make for your program, whether it's not revenue generating or revenue generating, or the reality of that, maybe it's not a decision you're making as much as the reality of it, and also whether you have fully dedicated staff or if there are non-dedicated staff participating, it will absolutely affect the complexity of the reporting requirement. The most complex programs for reporting are going to be those that are both generating revenue and also have staff that is not fully dedicated. In these cases, you will have to provide timesheets for each of the staff working on the project that is not dedicated. You will have to show your indirect rate agreement. That's for all programs if you're taking more than 10%. You will need to show an invoice of expenses, and that's the same across all. But the one part that maybe is has been difficult for some programs, and you may find difficult, is documenting all of the revenue generated from any other grant or funding source related to the staff working on this project. So just keep that in mind as you are developing your program and deciding how you want to structure it. If you look at programs that do not generate revenue, but all of the staff is not dedicated, you'll see that the timesheets requirement is still there, but there's not a requirement of documenting revenue. Now, if you go to the dedicated staff programs, so if all the staff working on this are 100%, you don't have any staff that are just partially on it. What makes that a little bit simpler is rather than timesheets, you can have signed statements from the staff or supervisor that dictate that 100% of their time was spent on this project. So you'll see that can lower the amount of complexity associated with the program. And the absolute lowest complexity in terms of reporting then would be programs that do not generate additional revenue and all of the staff are 100% dedicated to the program. I'm not suggesting that you pick one or the other. I just want you to understand what the report, how your decisions and how your program is structured will ultimately impact and affect your reporting requirements. Okay, I'm going to now turn it over to Kristen Hayden, who will go over the actual grant application with you.
Yeah, so if you can leave these slides up while I go through the rubric sections, that would be awesome. So you can move to the next slide. So the grant portal, where you're going to either sign in again if you're an already funded program or have already made an account, is the same as last year. And that'll be available on the website along with all the documents and all the other information that you need. And it's also just here on this slide. Next slide, please. Next slide. So we'll go over the grant rubric next, which has been updated from last year. The board has approved a slightly updated version to match what programs need and sort of the language that describes better what our intent is. So like last year, the first section of the rubric is the agency description. And this goes through what things are important about your agency to understand if you're a good fit for this grant. So that will cover things like your risk management strategy, that you have adequate staffing for your proposal, that you have the right licensing to perform the services that you propose, and that, and this is very important to the board, that you are practicing continually cultural humility and trauma-informed practices. So you'll be able to describe how all these things play into your agency. And finally, the last one is consumer satisfaction. So how you understand how your clients are experiencing your services. Next slide, please. The second section, section B, is the proposal description. So this is what your actual services that you will be providing are. And so this is outlined in detail in the application as well. But the board will be looking for the vision for what you're accomplishing. That includes your outcomes, what services you'll be providing. So that's the kinds of care you'll be providing, what populations or communities you're serving in Winnebago County, the sort of logistics of your proposal. So that's hours of operation, location, accessibility, things that are important to how you're serving your community. And then finally, we have expanded some of the definitions for the practices that you can provide for these. So evidence-based practice, best practice, or promising practice are what the board will be considering, and you'll be able to provide evidence to explain why the practice you have chosen is appropriate for your proposal. And there are more definitions for those in the strategic plan, and the application will say where to find those in the strategic plan as well. Next slide, please. So this is an update from last year. We changed this section to be community support system. So this is how your proposal matches the community support system model that the board is using. So it's kind of a shorter section, but this describes how your proposal fits into the larger ecosystem of mental health care, including what your collaborations look like, how it complements other programs in your area, including your own or your partners, how it might fill a gap or address needs that have been identified, and finally, how it aligns with the strategic plan. So you'll want to look through the strategic plan to make sure that things are lining up well. Next slide, please. The budget is very important. So the items they'll be looking at to understand your budget are what is in your budget, are all the costs allowable, what the indirect cost rates are. So it's important that you have enough indirect costs that you can cover the back end of things, how you're doing reporting and how you're doing administrative work, but not so high that it eats into your overall budget. And finally, we'll be looking at the positions you propose to fund and your proposed capital purchases. Next one. Finally, and this is only applicable this year and only applicable to folks who were funded last year. So this is agency continued funding. And this applies to any agency that has received funding, whether they are doing a continued funding application, or even if you are submitting a new application, we'll still be reviewing this as part of your application. So this involves financial compliance history. So have you worked to make sure your finances, your financial reporting has been accurate, and outcome reporting compliance history. So if you've been submitting your outcomes and making sure to fill those out thoroughly, whether you've been contract compliant for the Learning Network Collaborative, and whether the program has been aligned with the WCCMHB strategic plan and community priorities. And finally, if your use of previous funding is on target. And all of these, it's most important that you have been communicating with us about any changes or issues that you're having. And feel free to contact us if you have more questions about this particular section. Next slide, please.
Okay. I think this might be back to me for a second. So if you do have additional questions and you're not able to attend one of the question and answer sessions, you are always have the opportunity to send questions to info@mentalhealth.wincoil.us. That includes not only during the grant period, but really anytime that you have questions about the mental health board, you can send them to that email address and we will try to get you an answer. And then here again is the website. So in addition to the funding resource page, there are other pages on the website that can provide additional information to you about things the mental health board are doing. But really, we really, more than anything, would really encourage you to sign up for the email updates that are on the website so that you can keep informed as things are going on. We're try to be very transparent and send updates to that email list at critical decision-making moments and critical moments of new information. Just once again here, if you want to follow along also on social media, there's the Facebook page, Instagram, and all of the board meetings, as well as these videos with the grant seekers meeting and convening organizations to collaborate, Q&A sessions are all recorded and they are all on the YouTube channel. You can go back and even watch the grant seekers meeting from last year if you wanted to. Okay, so funding resources page.
And I can take over now with the screen share to show how the application works.
Great, thank you, Kristen. Sorry about that. Go ahead.
All right, give me 1 second. So we'll start with how to make a new account. So this is for folks who are new organizations primarily, or if something like the person who applied last year is no longer with your organization, so you don't have that login. I'm going to share this. So when you get to the the link for your grant portal login, and I'll show you what that looks like in 1 second. This is creating a new account. So there's a little bit of information you have to fill out so that you can be put into the system appropriately. So you'll need to know things about your organization, your name, your EIN, and I've just filled this out with some random information to show how it works. Your information, so we understand what position you have in the organization in case we have to reach out about something specific. Your executive officers information, because we make sure that they are looped in on some of the larger scale items as part of the grant, to make sure that everyone at the organization knows what's up. And finally, making your password. So I'll just hit cancel account creation. It'll take us back to the main page. So this is what the grant portal logon page has, and it's got a little bit of information about how to make a new account. All right, I'm going to stop the share and hop over to a different page. So I am going to show you the other way to add a new member to your organization. And I think this is easier. So I'd recommend if you already have an organization account that you use this way instead, which is the collaborate function. So I'm borrowing another one of our employee Joe Vidella's login here to show you how collaborate works. So when you are in an application, here you'll see this is where you're actually typing into the application. There'll be a collaborate button on the top right. And here you'll be able to add anyone to your organization. So you put in their email. This could be someone who's actually part of your organization, or it could be a third party if you are having outside folks help with your organization, your application. The 3 kinds of permissions is viewing, so they can't touch anything in the application. They can just see what's going on. Editing, which includes viewing, but also means that they can type in the boxes and do check marks and stuff. And finally is can submit. So if you want the person to be able to fully take over the application, hit submit at the end, you'll want that. And so this does work if you just want someone to help with the application, or if you want to just have a new member added to your organization, and they will be able to access everything that relates to this application, including follow-up forms in the future if you are chosen for funding. All right, and then switching over to a test applicant to walk through the applications themselves. So we started an application for, oops, sorry, that was the wrong one. The continued funding application. So this is for organizations that are proposing to continue the same program that they did last year. So I created just a quick checklist. This is entirely optional for things that have changed between last year's application and this year's application, just so that you are not caught off guard by some of the things that are asked here. And so you can choose to fill out the check marks as you go through, or not use it at all. It won't affect your score at all. It's just there for you. Instructions section that explains again how to use the collaborate feature with various kinds of tutorials from Foundant itself, which is nice. And the copy feature, which I'll be talking about with the new application. So I'm not going to go through all these questions in great detail. If you have questions about the questions, feel free to reach out to us. But I'm just going to run through some of the highlights just so you can see what the general form looks like. And the other thing to note about this is we will have a downloaded PDF version of these available on the website under funding resources. So in case you just want to read through it without actually going through the application, you are welcome to do that. Program contact, who do we talk to about questions about the application, your choices of what kind of organization you are, and uploads for things that are required in the funding policy. And again, if you have questions about what that entails, look through the NOFO, look through the funding policy, or contact us. A lot of these are just if your continued funding application has updated things, if you've added accreditation, if you have lost some of that, if it's changed, you'll be able to copy your information from last year's application into this, which is handy. And I've added the ability for you to edit those as well if you have some updates. So many of the questions you answered last year, all the text will show up, but then you'll also be able to edit it. All right. So the one thing that I really want to touch on before we move on to the new application, a lot of this will look familiar if you filled it out last year, is the budget. Okay, so the budget template has been updated. And so if you click on it, it'll take you to a Google sheet, and you can download it by clicking File, Download, and choosing what version you would like to download of it. Just wanted to point that out. And finally, another thing that we've added in these applications is a quick survey at the end, just so that we can understand what it's like to fill out the application. And so we are able to make it better every year. So again, this will not affect your score in any way. We really just want to know what the experience of filling this application out is like, and you can leave comments if you like. Okay, so that's what it looks like to open your application from, if you have a saved application, and there's a Save Application button down at the bottom. So you can work on this over a period of days. You don't need to do it all at once. But if you want to start a new application, you go to the Apply page, and you'll see them here. So in each summary, it's describing what the new application versus the continued funding application means. So make sure you read that to fill out the correct application. I actually need to hit submit for this one so I can show you how the copy feature works. Give me 1 second just to submit application. Okay. All right, that's fine. We'll just, I'll show you how it works without that. All right, so in the new application, you will go up to the top. So it says copy previous answers. So you'll click on that button, and applications that show up here as filled out, you'll be able to select them and copy the answers into this new application. So I'll show you, it was empty before. That was it updating the questions. So you'll see here that things will already be filled out. So not for profit. Some of these questions, and some of them have been left intentionally so that they have to be refilled out. So make sure your acknowledgement and the program contact person can be filled out again. And another thing that I wanted to point out is if you do go through and you put information into a question before you copy it, the copy feature will not overwrite that. All right, I think. Yeah, okay, so that is the overview of the application logistics. If you have questions again about the content or anything, feel free to let us know. And I'll stop the share and hand it back over to Jason. You're muted.
Thank you. I believe that actually concludes our presentation today. I'm not going to go on the funding resources page. We showed a little bit of that, and you can go on that page with the URL and find additional information that might be useful to you. And we also have, of course, those 2 question and answer sessions coming up. We will record those and put those on YouTube. So even if you're not able to attend live, you will be able to have access to all of that. We'll also, pending how many questions we get, create some type of document that summarizes the Q&As for everybody's benefit to utilize that information. And please reach out to us at the info@mentalhealth.wincoil.us with any additional questions. If you have questions about the technical components of filling out the application, you can contact Kristen directly. Kristen, would you like to give your contact email address?
Yeah. So it's K Hayden, K in my last name, which is spelled at the bottom of my my screen here, but KHAYDEN @r1planning.org.
Wonderful. All right. Well, I think that concludes our meeting today. Kristen, anything else you wanted to add? No? Okay. Well, very good. Happy grant writing. I hope that you enjoy the extra 2 weeks we gave you this year, full 8 weeks before the due date. So that should hopefully give you plenty of time to write some great collaborative, innovative programs. Thanks.